What are some very creepy facts? Story 1. There is a genetic disease called fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva. When tissue is damaged, it is replaced with bone. Growths form underneath their skin and their joints lock solid. So over time, those affected slowly become encased in a prison of bone just beneath their own skin. They usually have to choose between sitting or standing up for the rest of their life. By the end of their life, they have to drink every meal through a straw and can barely move. And removing the excess bone with surgery is no option either, because the injuries from the surgery will create even more bone. Story 2. Bacteria and viruses can be frozen for millions of years and still be viable infectious. And having never encountered humanity before, could have no end of catastrophic results should they be uncovered and manage to infect a person or animal. Not to worry though, it's not like millions of ancient pathogens are currently trapped in permafrost, which is now melting bit by bit each and every day. Story 3. Your eyes have a separate immune system from the rest of your body. If they get damaged in such a way that it affects anything other than your eyes, your regular immune system can attack the damage and will not recognize them, meaning your own body can permanently blind you. What's worse, your body cannot tell the difference between either eye. If one of them gets infected or damaged, your immune system can attack your healthy eye and take away your sight entirely. Story 4. Rosemary Kennedy was JFK's sister. She suffered from oxygen deprivation at birth, and that unfortunately stunted her mental growth. She had a pretty decent childhood, but as she grew older, she began to act out. Afraid that her behavior would risk his political career, her father, Joseph, agreed to have her lobotomized. Her mother, Rose, was against it and forbade him from doing it. So he did it behind her back when she went on a trip. After the operation, Rosemary's already low IQ was lowered even further, to the point she could no longer walk or communicate. Her family had her locked up in an institution and basically disowned her. They never visited and never publicly acknowledged her anymore. Rosemary died at the age of 86. Her mother never forgave her husband for what he had done. Story 5. The men of the ship Essex, the true event that inspires the story Moby Dick, avoided islands after being shipwrecked for fear of cannibals. The islands were settled, and landing there would have brought salvation to the survivors. Ironically, because of this bypass, the men ran out of food and were forced to eat each other for survival. Do you know what's even creepier? 2 of the sailors were later rescued by an American ship. They were alone at sea for so long and had to cannibalize their crewmates to survive. When they saw their rescuers, they immediately stashed bones in their pockets. They didn't seem to care that they were rescued. They were obsessed with the bones of their fallen crewmates, so they could suck on the bone marrows. Even after they were on board the ship, they refused to depart from the bones and would even attack anyone who would come close. Story 6. Elmer McCurdy was a failed Old West outlaw. His preserved body was put on display in a traveling carnival, and years later, he was eventually assumed to be a mannequin until he was used on the set for the TV show The $6 Million Man. His arm accidentally fell off during the shoot, revealing bone and muscle, and revealing that he was a corpse, not a mannequin. Story 7. One reason that crows and ravens are associated with death is that they would often follow armies as they marched to battle. Being both carrion birds and extremely intelligent, they realized that a large group of armed men marching in one direction meant that there would be a tasty meal of corpses to eat soon afterward. Story 8. Imagine being totally aware of someone performing CPR, but you physically cannot move or respond. Well, that's what happens when you get bitten by a blue-ringed octopus. You have approximately 6 minutes between being bitten and someone starting CPR to keep your heart and lungs functioning to ensure you survive, all whilst being totally aware of what is happening to you. Neurotoxins are fun. The really creepy thing about this is one story of a guy who got stung, got CPR performed on him, and survived, but went blind because he was lying on his back, eyes open, unable to blink because of the paralysis, staring into the sun. Imagine lying there, unable to move, unable to communicate, the sun slowly burning out your eyes, and you can't shut them. Story 9. Your brain can play tricks on you to make you see monsters in the mirror, called the Troxler effect. The Troxler effect is an optical illusion that affects how you perceive things, both visually and mentally. Story 10. I once read that you should play dead if a bear attacks you, unless they start licking your wounds, because that means they plan to eat you. That still haunts me to this day. Edit. If it helps, I'm pretty sure I was reading about grizzly bears at the time during one of my fevered grizzly man rabbit holes. Story 11. It wasn't until 1987 that the American Academy of Pediatrics declared it unethical to operate on newborns without anesthesia. Until surprisingly recently, the medical community felt it would be dangerous to give infants anesthesia and/or believed that they didn't feel pain. Story 12. Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. They discovered that this was because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies. Female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose in order to avoid necrophilia at the embalmers. Story 13. According to Abe Lincoln's bodyguard, Crook, he said Lincoln had a dream about his own assassination 3 nights in a row before he was killed. Crook told Lincoln not to go on that fateful night, and all Lincoln said was, "Goodbye, Crook," before he went to the play. This was very odd, as Lincoln always said good night, not goodbye. Story 14. I bring this up at parties all the time. When climbing Mount Everest, there's a point nicknamed Rainbow Valley or Rainbow Ridge, because it's absolutely littered with the bodies of people who attempted to make the climb. The combination of the extremely cold temperature and the bright snowsuits means that they've become a never-rotting but colorful landmark. Story 15. The origins of vampires as we know them. Basically, your body has gas buildup when you die. I'm not medically inclined enough to explain why. Basically, the gas has to escape somehow, and so it would pass through the vocal cords in the throat. This creates the low moan that makes the body sound as if it was in pain. The people back then had no idea what was happening, and random bodies would just start moaning in pain. And thus they believed that the bodies were rising from the dead, and when stabbed, the gas escaped otherwise, thus leading to the belief that the only way to stop a vampire was to stab a dead body in the chest. This also led to a lot of strange burials, i.e., the man that was buried in a stone wall to prevent him from rising from the dead. I can't really blame them. I'd be freaked out too if a corpse suddenly started to make sounds. Creepy for some, but I find stuff like that fascinating. There are documentaries on YouTube talking about it. I highly recommend them. Story 16. Human brains, when they dry out, smell like cat piss. That stinky ammonia smell. I worked in an ER for 17 years in CT. Had a gunshot to the head come in, and a chunk fell onto my shoe and didn't notice. While driving home, it was like, what the hell, did my cat piss in the car or something? Went to take my shoes off, and there it was. Story 17. People don't take their anti-malarial drugs when they travel because they hear bad stories about the side effects, and they see native people in the areas living okay without taking pills every day. The truth is, populations native to malaria-endemic areas have all passed through pretty intense natural selection for survival, and have a host of genes that prevent them from dying or suffering the other worst effects. Also, most of the resistance is built up over time. This is why it's most common for children to die rather than adults. Whatever people have heard about the side effects of the anti-malarials, getting it is so much worse. I, fortunately, have never had it, but I study it as part of my work, and people have told me about having it, and they all say the same thing. It is so awful, you can't believe you're even still alive. It comes in cycles, usually 48 hours, and each cycle is agonizing and brings you to the brink of death. Sometimes it takes you. Sometimes it spares you for another few hours until it starts again. And there are forms that, even if you clear the infection with drugs, it still remains dormant in your system and can come back at any time. Story 18. The stonefish, an incredibly venomous fish living in tropical waters mostly off the coast of Australia and parts of the US, can cause pain that only escalates with time. Eventually, the pain will subside, but even after the barb is removed, patients have reported increasing pain 12+ hours later. Without antivenom or denaturing the venom with excessive heat, the pain builds and builds until the patients request euthanasia. Its spines hold the venom, hidden in its dorsal fins. Aboriginals living around the Great Barrier Reef have corroborees, large gatherings, and will during these gatherings hold reenactments of people being stung by this monster, for what I assume is either amusement, learning, or both. Story 19. A black mamba is the fastest snake, which can slither at a speed of 12.5 miles an hour, or 20 kilometers an hour. They have neurotoxins, which are fast-acting. The venom shuts down the nervous system and paralyzes the victim. Its venom is able to kill 10 people, and it repeatedly bites. To add on to this, there is an almost 100% kill rate and can kill in 20 minutes. When I went on a safari, the guide had no problem driving by the family of lions, cougars, crazy hippos, everything else we saw. However, when he spotted a black mamba, this incredible fear came over his face. The snake was right in the middle of the dirt, and he wouldn't even drive past it. We were in one of those open Jeep safari things. The guide was so frightened that he just zoomed in reverse and got away so quickly. He said they can jump up in the car and do all kinds of crazy things. I don't know if that's true, but I know that he was genuinely afraid, and we got out of that area so fast. Story 20. Cockroaches have been recorded eating human flesh, both living and dead, as well as fingernails, eyelashes, feet, and hands. The American cockroach and German cockroach are more likely to bite humans than other species. Pretty sure Australian cockroaches do something equally creepy, but as an Australian who plans to sleep at some point in the future, I'm not going to Google it. Story 21. Blobfish in its natural habitat looks like a normal fish, but it lives so deep underwater that it doesn't use a normal gas bladder to keep itself balanced. Instead, it has a spongy skin that is slightly less dense than water, which becomes damaged and bloated when fishermen bring it up too quickly. It's not really the ugliest fish. It has just experienced something worse than one of us being thrown into outer space. Between sea level and space, there's 1 atmospheric pressure difference. Between sea level and 2,000 feet underwater, their upper limit, there's 60 atmospheres of difference. Story 22. Contrary to popular belief, the Space Shuttle Challenger did not explode. The fuel tank it was attached to did, and it forced the shuttle to change direction so quickly that aerodynamic forces tore it apart. The crew module survived the initial breakup, and it's believed that some of the astronauts were conscious for the long fall back to Earth. Upon inspecting the wreckage, NASA also determined that some of the switches were thrown, indicating that the pilot vainly tried to fly what was left of the shuttle before it crashed into the ocean. Story 23. It was once discovered that a fir tree was growing inside of a human body. Artyom Sidorkin went to the doctor suspecting something wrong with his lungs. The doctors thought they were dealing with a tumor, but it turns out he had inhaled a fir tree seed which had sprouted and had begun growing in his lungs. Story 24. If you stifle a sneeze, there's a chance you can damage organs in your head, including eye blood vessels, rupturing your eardrums, and possibly rupture a brain aneurysm, which means there's a small chance stifling a sneeze can kill you. Better to be the loud ass with the sneeze that can be heard around the world than a dead loud ass because someone told you to stifle that sneeze. Story 25. In the Czech Republic, there is a church called the Sedlec Ossuary that has decorations made entirely of human bones. This happened because there were too many people in the cemetery to bury everyone, and the church leaders claimed that if their bones became part of the church, it only made them closer to God. Nice propaganda spin there, guys. Story 26. In 2015, a young woman began to have headaches. They discovered that she had a brain tumor, and when the doctors removed it, they were shocked to see that it was a lump resembling skin that contained bone, teeth, and hair. But this was no parasitic twin. The mass was called a teratoma, or monstrous tumor. When the woman was an embryo, some cell tissue fell off and ended up where it wasn't supposed to be, her brain. It then developed hair and teeth while the rest of her grew as normal. Story 27. I find that the most disturbing facts are space-related, and also it's crazy to me how little we truly know of the mysterious universe. We like to think that we're smart because we are the most intelligent thing we know of. But when you look at the galaxies roaming the universe on a near infinite scale, the possibilities are legitimately endless. I heard that the size of the observable universe compared to the expansion of the Big Bang 13.8 million years ago, that the size of the actual universe could be as much as 900 times bigger, and light just hasn't traveled far enough to reach us. Could you imagine the size of that? It's inconceivable. I hope that when we die, we get to go to a dimension where we just know everything about everything, and all mysterious things are revealed. And when we have enough time exploring everything again, we can choose to be born as life again on some other planet and face our own challenges from a different perspective. Story 28. Disneyland has a big problem with ashes. So many people were spreading ashes of their loved ones that Disney had to buy a special vacuum cleaner that cleans away human ashes. So the Haunted Mansion is actually haunted. On a lighter note, you know how they say the Haunted Mansion has 999 souls, but always room for one more? Well, a few years ago, Disney auctioned off a custom tombstone to the highest bidder to be put in the ride as the 1,000th soul. So once that person dies, their grave is in Disneyland. Story 29. Pilots in Pakistan who fly thousands of people a year paid for their pilot's license and did not actually go to school or get training. Pakistan's aviation minister told Parliament that a large number of commercial pilots hold fake licenses or cheated in exams. It comes as an initial report into a PIA crash that 97 people last month found the cause to be human error by the pilot and air traffic control. Mr. Khan said investigations had found that more than 260 of the country's 860 active pilots had either fake licenses or had cheated in their exams. Story 30. UVB-76, also known as the Buzzer, is believed to be a Russian shortwave radio station. It has been mysteriously broadcasting the same signal since 1982. No one knows where the signal is coming from or why. It sounds like low buzzing, with the occasional Russian voice transmission. Probably some gopniks in their bunker. Story 31. Any story about cosmonauts during the space race? Russia only wanted to get to space first. It didn't matter how many failed missions were between them and succeeding. It was all trial and error. If somebody didn't survive an attempt, they were wiped from history, and any documentation destroyed, including being edited out of photographs. One story that I remember is the first man to free walk in space, Alexei Leonov. They didn't account for the pressure difference when making his suit, so when he stepped out, the suit expanded to the point of nearly falling apart, and he couldn't fit back in through the door. He had to release the oxygen from the suit to deflate it enough to get back inside. Another one is the Giudica Cordiglia brothers. This one may be considered more of a conspiracy theory, but as far as I know, the recordings are real. They were radio operators who picked up signals of very distressed-sounding Russian voices and an SOS signal drifting away from Earth. When translated, the voices were calling for help, saying history would forget them, and saying it is getting very hot. Story 32. I don't remember what state park it was, but there was a huge rock, like huge. There was a group of people, and one member of the group walked behind the rock, and when the group followed, the individual was gone. I can't for the life of me remember the park name. They never found the person. Story 33. There's a whole industry of small bars in a country in Asia which feed people nitrous oxide to relax them and get them addicted. The Drug is semi-legal, so cannot be completely stopped. Once hooked, people keep vowing to never go again, but eventually get cravings and keep going back and using more and more. This is a whole industry that provides many bars with nitrous oxide who use it to give patrons the disease of addiction and then profit from their devastation. Why is it a fact? I know, and I got sucked in. I'm being sent to rehab and have caused untold financial losses on my family. It has certainly messed up my brain for life, and it will take years of recovery. Story 34. If bitten by a blue-ringed octopus, its bite can be painless, but its venom can kill up to 26 adults. Its painless bite will disable your respiratory muscles, and because there is no anti-venom or antidote for it, you must go to a hospital to be hooked up to a machine that breathes for you as you wait for your lungs to inevitably stop working. Story 35. Psychoanalysis has concluded, basically, that we are made up of sub-personalities all with their own wills, motivations, and impulses. The further you go down the subject of self and what you are, you find you're not really you, and what you consider you is a fragmented part of the whole, maybe the ego or something analogous to it. It's freaky because we can feel foreign even to ourselves, and in a way, we are foreign to ourselves. It's just a complete mystery, and finding answers inevitably raises more questions. Story 36. When the Juan de Fuca plate slips and creates an earthquake, the resulting tsunami will level the greater Seattle area and almost certainly kill anyone there. It will be the largest casualty day in U.S. history. Story 37. When you're a toddler, your next set of teeth are nearly fully formed and are only a few millimeters away from scraping against your eyeballs. Toddler skulls look more predator than human.